Good to see everybody back after our break. Record reflect, we are back in session. Parties and council are present. All members of our jury and our alternates are present. And we're ready to proceed. Defense may call your next witness.
Yes. Principal Dr. Lenny Rubin.
My first name is Leonid, L-E-O-N-I-D, for short Lenny. Last name is Rudin, R-U-D-I-N.
Okay. Good.
Thank you, Honor. Dr. Rudin, what do you do for a living?
Good question.
Let's start at the beginning.
Well, I have a PhD in computer science.
We'll get to that. What do you do?
I'm a forensic scientist.
Okay. Do you have any education that allows you to say you're a forensic scientist?
Yes, I do.
Could you go through your education based on the years that you achieved the degree?
I hope so. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. No, could you list your education?
Oh, okay. It's a long list, so I have my CV with me. I expected this. That is my education. Well, basically, I have, counting backwards, I have a PhD degree in computer science with specialty in imaging science from California Institute of Technology, known as Caltech. And I also have a master's degree in computer science from Caltech. And I have a master's degree in applied mathematics from University of Odessa. And then I have other kind of intermediate things that happened before and after.
So you have the master's in applied mathematics, but then you also applied to your master's in computer science at the California Institute of Technology, and you gained a doctorate in computer science, correct?
Yes.
Based on having those degrees, did you at some point create a company by the name of, or were involved in the company by the name of Cognitive?
Yes, I'm one of the co-founders.
Okay. So what do you do at Cognitive?
Well, currently I'm a chief executive officer of Cognitech.
Well, let me ask you, what does Cognitive do?
Well, Cognitech is specializing in forensic video analysis, forensic video processing, and forensic photogrammetry 3D analysis for forensic applications.
And you're out of Pasadena, California, correct?
Yes, we are.
And you've been doing that since approximately 1988?
The company was started in 1988, yes.
And you're also a forensic video and photogrammetry instructor?
Yes.
And you've been doing that for almost 30 years?
It's hard to believe, yes.
You're also a visiting professor where you also teach applied mathematics and computer science? Or you have been?
Jackson leading Overload Foundation.
So I've been a visiting professor and a part-time full professor in 5 different universities, including California Institute of Technology, University of Paris, France, Paris Dauphine, France, Superior, France, and UCLA.
And one of the things that you teach and also work with is photogrammetry, right?
Correct.
And the jury's heard already what photogrammetry is. Can you give me a basic explanation of how you understand it and use it?
Well, how much time do I have?
Let's keep it brief.
Okay,
Reader's
so,
Digest version.
all right, so I had hearings and I spent 2 hours talking about this. So photogrammetry is a science. It's applied computational science. And the purpose of photogrammetry is, original purpose of photogrammetry is measuring objects depicted by photographs, and therefore photogrammetry, measuring from photographs. So it's a very old discipline, goes back to World War I, where airplanes were measuring the lengths of fortifications, taking photographs, figuring out how many soldiers were below. And since then, this science has about 100 years in development, just about 100 years. And now it's known more as computer vision, computational computer vision / photogrammetry. And the goal is exactly the same, measuring things that are depicted in images. Images could be many other things than photographs. It could be videos, it could be infrared images, it could be three-dimensional images, etc.
And it can be used in a forensic or criminal analysis as well. In a case to determine if you can match up images or things inside an image to known items.
That's correct.
And I always think of a common example of if you have a video of a robbery and you have a suspect in a video on a robbery and you see them leave, you may be able to get measurements of the size and different shape of the person based on known heights inside that video. Would that be fair to say?
I believe I was the first in the world to do this. In 1995, I applied my methods developed earlier at Caltech to do just that. And I published a paper in 1995 for this subject.
I always call it the 7-Eleven example, because like the doors have those foot markers and you can kind of see someone's height.
Objection. Is there a question pending?
Overruled.
Is that kind of what you're describing? You can have known height that you can measure and determine basic height or identifying features of the suspect?
That would be easy because you're just standing next to a bunch of lines, but you may be standing anywhere and we can still measure you. So
you get a measurement. How is that used in trying to link up with possible suspects?
okay, so the simplest measurement would be the height of the suspect. So that's one biometrics that you can use.
And would you look for height that's consistent or not too disparate from that height? Like you have somebody that says they're 6 foot, your suspect's 5 foot. Would that be an
Right,
issue?
so I like to say that photogrammetry is a very good rejection analysis because, there are many people 5.8, many people 5.9, many people 6. Okay, there are very few people 6.5, of course, and very few people 4 point whatever, a little less than that. So if you are within the average range, this is a very good technique to reject. Because just because you found that somebody's 5.8, that's not an identifying characteristic. But it's some degree of consistency, but call it consistent with implies something much more. So I would say if somebody's 5'7" and we know our accuracy is 1 inch, and we're measuring 5.8 or 5.8 and a half, then we reject.
Okay, so I like that. So you're looking for characteristics to reject a comparison between an evidence image and a suspect image.
Yeah, if there are only few measurements you can make, then rejection is your best strategy.
And are there other things that you're looking for in the image that you can use to reject on, say, objects?
Yes.
So the example, you see a picture of the computer and there's obviously something totally different about the computer, you have to reject it just based on visuals.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, if you have a computer that's black and has a Windows sticker on it, and the suspect wants silver and has an Apple sticker on it, those are visuals you could say, well, if we reject that, it may not be the same, a different size, but it has characteristics that are obvious, that are different. Would that be fair to say?
Are you talking about me looking at the computer screen or a computer as an object?
Computer is an object in an image.
Okay, so measurement is one thing, and then there are identifying characteristics which are not related to measurements, like when it says Lenny's computer, then it's Lenny's computer, but if it says somebody else's computer, but that's not measurements.
Right. How about application to vehicle? What are some of the characteristics you look for in the measurements in comparison to vehicle?
Okay, so this is fairly new stuff, and when I say new, it's the last 10 years or so. So people look at different things, but I'm an old school and I look at measurements. So to me, a vehicle is a three-dimensional object that has some parts and that are visible and can be identified by human eye. And then we measure distances and angles and areas and such things, basic geometry. And to me, that's what identifies an object with these characteristics.
So the shape of the vehicle is one thing, but the measurements is another.
Well, you're asking a mathematical question, what's a shape? It's related, actually. I mean, if something is a sphere, a ball, a sphere, we call it a sphere, and then if you take a bunch of points on it and you start measuring things, you can actually deduce from it that it's a sphere. So those things are related. But I would say shape is it's a higher level concept from measurements.
And then what kind of, if you're taking a measurement of, let's just say, a vehicle on a evidence image, how do you measure that image?
Okay, I teach a course. It takes about 2 years to explain. But basically, way back 100 years ago, the strategy was, it was observed that if you could take two photographs, you take your camera, you take, one picture and then another picture when you shift your camera, then there's a technique called triangulation, basically meaning that if you know the angle at which you're looking at the object and you know the base distance, then you just do basic geometry and then you find the distance. Once you find the distance to one point and distance to another point, then you can find distance between those 2 points. That's a classical photogrammetry. It's called stereo photogrammetry. But that's not what I do.
So if you want to get the measurements of a vehicle, so we have a picture of a vehicle, you put data points on the photograph that you can identify as aspects.
Section leading.
16.
Let's back up. Describing your process. You first
Okay.
will receive items of evidence that you want to review, correct?
Yes.
And then you will process those evidentiary items using a computer,
Yes.
and you have a program that you develop to help analyze that.
Yes.
And what program is that?
I have several programs, but my basic tool is called something AutoMeasure.
And that's something that you created at Cognitech?
Me and 20 other scientists.
Yes. And so you'll put this evidentiary items into the computer. After you do that, you have the image on the screen. If you want to establish measurements of
Section leading.
if you want to establish measurements of that item, what do you do?
Okay. It depends what the item is. If the item is a human being, you have one strategy. If the item is a vehicle, you have a different strategy.
Let's say it's a vehicle.
Okay, vehicle is very complicated because, okay, so it depends what you see. If you see the entire vehicle with the wheels on the ground, okay, then you could measure, for example, wheelbase using photogrammetry techniques, because you have points on the ground, and there are very effective techniques to measure what happens on the ground. And there's a process involved. You need either make measurements at the scene, or take several stereo pictures at the scene, and at least one physical measurement, and then combine it all in this mathematical process, and then it will give you an ability to measure wheelbase, because you can see the points of contact on the ground. Once you measure the wheelbase, you can trace yourself up and measure the height of the vehicle. Once you measure the height of the vehicle, then you can measure other linear dimensions, parallel dimensions. Knowing the height, you can measure the length of the vehicle itself, and then you can start measuring things like door characteristics, window size, etc., etc. So it's a sequential process.
And then all those different distances can be compared to one another within the program. Would that be fair to say?
Okay, once you get these distances, you don't need the program. You just look at the table. You check, okay, my measured vehicle is, 10 feet, and the other vehicle I want to compare is whatever that number is. So you have comparison. So you don't need a computer to do that. It's simple lookup, table lookup and comparison. And then you compute an error. You subtract one from the other and take percentages. You can do some statistics as well.
So then you say you start comparing the measurement table for the evidence image with the measurement table of a known item, say a vehicle. And then you see if there's an error between the distances. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
And what's an acceptable range of error for this type of calculation?
Well, it's really subjective. There are two ways to say it. One way is just to establish a threshold and say, okay, let's say it's 5% is acceptable, over 5% is not acceptable, or up to 10% acceptable, over 10% not acceptable. But what's the basis of it? So you have to look at this population of what you're measuring, right? If you're measuring human beings, a couple of inches makes a big difference, because humans are not. If you look at the statistical curve of what the distribution of height of humans is, you will see that some kind of average. I'm not sure what it is. Depends on the country. I don't know. Over here, probably people are very tall. So most people taller than me, so they're probably 5'9" or something, 5'10". And then you look at standard deviation and you figure out what that means in terms of inches. So typically a couple of inches, and if over a few inches, that's a big difference. Now for a vehicle, 2-inch difference, 3-inch difference obviously is not a big difference, because if you look at statistics, and again, I have not seen work on that. I mean, that should be done, but nobody has done really such statistical work. So you could probably do distributions of vehicles in different classes, of course, and figure out what that standard deviation should be, at least one standard deviation, and then see what that size is. But to me, a rule of thumb is, I just in practice, I look at 5-6% error because not going at the statistics of images, but looking at my experience with models. And the models themselves, the data and the way you measure and all of these things can introduce error. And just experimentally, I know that the error could be up to 5%. So if I have a 5% error, then that's my like borderline 6%, whatever. So that's just based on heuristics and experience.
Are you familiar with the case of People versus Charles Merritt?
That's the case I'm here for.
Correct.
Thank you. Yes.
And you reviewed the evidence that was collected in this matter, or at least the video evidence of a vehicle that was collected in this matter?
Could you repeat the question, please?
You've reviewed video evidence that was collected and photographs of vehicles that were collected in
Yes,
this
I
matter?
did.
And you were retained by the prosecution to analyze that, correct?
I think so, yes.
You think so, or are you sure?
Well, I'm not sure anymore, but I think I was.
Well, if I show you an email you sent to the prosecution, and that maybe help refresh your memory on that subject.
Okay.
Jack does the relevance, misstates the evidence.
Oh, no.
Read that to yourself. Let us know when you're done.
Thank you. So that's a later thing. So it refers to my current status of. I guess let me rephrase myself. I'm not sure whose witness I am at this point, but at some point I was a prosecution witness. If that's your question.
Yes. It was the prosecution team that provided you all the information, whether it be in the form of videos or photographs or Faro scans. They provided you all the information that you initially requested. Would that be fair to say?
They provided me with some information that I requested, yes.
And you had contact with Detective or Sergeant Ryan Smith, correct, about some issues?
Yes, I did.
And you had contact with Deputy or Supervising Deputy Attorney Brett Hines.
Yes, I did.
And some of the things that they gave you were what looked to be a surveillance video from, looked like shooting from the front of the house with vehicles driving by.
Yes,
There was daytime clips and nighttime clips.
correct.
You also received photographs of an Isuzu Trooper.
Yes, yes.
And photographs of a white truck with a utility part in the back.
Yes,
And you received Faro scans, correct?
yes.
You received them of the neighborhood? Were they relayed to you, this is where the video was taken from?
Okay. I need to clarify this. It turns out we did have a scan, a very early scan of the neighborhood, but I personally was not aware of it until, I would say, January, I believe, end of January of 2019. And then we recovered it from archive, and then we found that it had a part that would be useful to us, even though the name on the file on the scan was indicating some other residence.
Did you also receive a thorough scan of the white truck?
2 of them.
Well, the white truck with the utility bed in the back?
I'm not a car person. I'm not sure what utility bed means.
You mean like, well, the box, like just a metal box on the back of a truck.
It's fairly boxy, yes.
And then you also received a thorough scan of an Isuzu Trooper.
You know, I'm not sure about this. Yes.
Is there anything else that you received that you can think of that I didn't list?
Yes.
What else?
So we received the second scan later on for the white truck. Then later on, being after my 402 hearing here, and we also received some notes taken by detectives at the crime scene. By crime scene, I mean the area in front of that camera that captured that video. I'm not sure what the name of that place is. Address is Fallbrook something.
Fallbrook is the name of the city, yes.
Oh, okay. So there's a street there. So anyway, so we received a PDF file that showed measurements, hand measurements of various points on that driveway, and I think there's a lawn in front, and possibly a few measurements right next to the house.
And with all those items, you put them through the process you described before. Would that be fair to say? And we'll go through the process, but you did try to process the items.
Yes, we put everything in and we process, yes.
Now, when you finished the process, did you write a report of what you did?
No,
Did you write a report of what you received?
no,
Did you write a report showing the findings that you had, whether it be measurements, comparisons, that show all the information that you had and how you analyzed it?
well, I produced pictures, images with measurements on them that were sort of self-explanatory. And those were produced, and that's the only thing I was asked to produce.
So you weren't asked to produce a report.
We never discussed the report.
Now, you're a mathematician.
Yes,
You teach mathematics.
sometimes.
Now, whenever I took math, the biggest complaint teachers always have is, show your work. How'd you get there? Right?
Okay.
Do you teach that to your students? Show your work?
Well, show your work could mean many different things.
Show the process you want to show how I can analyze what steps you took to get to the answer you got to.
Oh, you mean the method, describing the method that you used.
Right.
Okay, because there's difference between results and the method. Okay,
Right.
so we don't always describe the method. It's understood that people who deal with this already know the method. We basically describe our results, and if it's self-evident how results were derived with the use of a standard method, then you don't have to describe the method.
Mathematics. I took a lot of mathematics. I have a little master model for many years. Simple addition, 7 plus 5, 12. There's no real math to show, right? If you do advanced calculus,
Yes.
there's a lot of work to show. Who cares what the answer is, right? It's how'd you get there? Did you follow the right process? Was the right decisions made? Where is the corrections that could be made or errors found in the process, right?
Okay, so you see, image processing and photogrammetry is sort of by itself. It's of course there are many formulas, and you can fill hundreds of pages with formulas, which won't tell much because most people won't be able to understand what it is. With images, a picture is worth a million words, right, or whatever the saying is. So when you take a image and you superimpose measurements, and then you compare to another image, which is image of the three-dimensional model, which is accurate to size, to scale, and it shows those measurements, and then you look at both of them and you say, oh, okay, wheelbase here is 10.8, and wheelbase here is 9.5. That's kind of self-explanatory. And that's what we produced. Could I add to that?
Please,
Yeah, also during 402 hearings, I believe
we'll get to
Okay.
it here.
the method was presented in details.
Now, let's start with the nighttime video surveillance that was provided to you. Okay? And at some point, did you have to take that video image and put points of reference on the image?
Yes,
And how many points of reference did you reach at a maximum total?
I believe 10.
And I'll show you what's been marked exhibit 1150. This is number A within that digital exhibit. We can have my computer. Right? It's up to turn this. And you can see the screen to your left. Do you recognize that image?
Yes.
And could you describe what that image is for the jury?
Okay, so this comes from, I think I call it frame 76, but actually I checked the clip and it could be 77. It's the first frame where the .9, the shiny .9 showed up in that sequence. So depending which clip I used, it was 76 or 77. So, so the process consists of finding features using human eye, features that are judged to be stable and identifiable, quote unquote. And I will explain in a second what it means identifiable. Clicking those, basically finding an X and Y position on the computer screen, clicking that, and then, and in this case, so features were identified based on visibility of what we assume are front lights. Right? So, and one light is seen in its entirety, the other light, the passenger light is, assuming these are lights, okay, we don't know what it is. So assuming these are lights, so the passenger light is full four corners, and the driver's car, depends whether you're United Kingdom or here, but we're here, so that's a driver's side, 0.7, and then there's point above that probably number sticks out somewhere else. And then there were some other points that were less identifiable, but we tried them anyway, which were some kind of highlights below the driver's side, passenger side, points number 6 and 3. And the jewel is point number 9, and I'm sure we'll talk about this point again. That's the most important point in the whole image.
And
So-
why did you mark number 8? Can you see anything there to mark number 8?
Yeah, it's probably, not in this, you have to look at an image. I'm not sure what this 8 was. I would have to look at my image. I mean, I have much better resolution images. Could be a center, some kind of insignia or something. We thought maybe. But let me tell you something. It doesn't hurt to put more points. By imposing human knowledge on it, makes things actually worse in the process. In other words, more points you throw in, the harder it is to do the analysis and fit the model. So
More numbers
there's-
equal more.
there's no
comparison.
harm. Yes. There's no harm done in getting more points.
So on this exhibit, just to kind of clarify, the passenger, which you're assuming is a headlight, you put 4 points. You put the 10 in the top right, 5 in the bottom right, 4 in the bottom left. I believe that's a 1 in the top left, correct?
Yeah.
And then on the driver's side, you put a 7 on the bottom left. I believe that's a 2 in the top left.
I'm not sure. So there's 6, 3, obviously 4, 5, and it says 10 actually there. I'm not sure why.
You have a 10 here, but it's a 1 here, right? And then a 2 there.
I'm not sure. I didn't look at it real well. The number, I think the number of the upper left, I don't have a mouth.
You have the laser pointer right there in front of you.
So this guy number is somewhere probably sticks out. So probably ended up in a white part, and because you have this white, you don't see it. So whatever numbers are there, there must be altogether actually 9 points. Actually, it is 1. Oh, wait a minute, that's actually 5. No, that's 5. I'm not sure what this is.
That's 10.
Yeah, it says 10, but I,
Because if you look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6 on the other two, 7 for center grill, 8 and 9 on the bumper, and then 10 for the marker in the back. So 10 marks, right?
okay, yeah. I'm not sure why I didn't call this 10 and this 1, 2, whatever, but for whatever reason.
So number 3, what were you marking in number 3? There's like a
I believe there
reflection.
was a,
Objection leading.
again, the resolution of this is pretty bad. I don't remember. I think it's either some kind of a highlight or, oh, I remember, a hypothetical box or something. There's some kind of a box that could be possibly matched to it. So there was some kind of object on a three-dimensional model, and then we just conjectured that maybe, just maybe, that is the point.
So it's not anything you can see, you just try to put it matching to something else that you had a hypothetical of it might be there.
Oh, no, you could see it actually. If you look at the better resolution, these images are somehow, I wish I had my computer with me so I could show you. You could see a faint kind of a boxy object, but that object, for all you know, could be noise. So there's a thing called noise, visual noise. So, but it has some stability over a period of frames, so we thought that maybe it is in fact something. So we just conjectured that it is that.
Now, there appears to be something right at the bottom of the 7. Why didn't you mark that?
Oh, because, okay, because we weren't sure. You see, it's not a pointy thing, right? It's a line, right? It's a line.
Right.
And so we basically thought that maybe, just maybe, this is a reflection of the bumper. But where on the bumper is it? Where does it start and where does it end? We don't know, right? I mean, it's somewhere on the bumper, so if I tell you that something is on the line, where on the line is it? I don't know. So we couldn't click it. Now you could you could probably say something like this, oh, okay, this, under this, so let's just take a bumper under that. But because of the projection, those things are perturbed, so they're not verticals anymore. So we didn't use it. I mean, I guess we could have used it, but we didn't use it because it wasn't what I consider a stable feature.
It couldn't be treated as the top of the bumper?
I'm not sure, I have to recall these images, it's been some time. I think if I remember, I haven't looked at this for a while. There is a metallic part to the bumper, kind of like a, what do you call that? Shiny metal, nickel or whatever it's called, chrome. So there's a chrome part, I believe. So one can conjecture that if you have a chrome part, it behaves like a mirror, right? So you hit it with the light, and then it reflects what you call specular reflection. In other words, a point-like kind of thing, right?
Right.
So it comes out as some kind of a linear object, which is highly concentrated. So I'm not sure I answered your question. That's the origin of that theory.
So the assigning of points on this evidence image from the surveillance camera would be used to compare this to points assigned on other vehicles. Would that be fair to say?
On a three-dimensional model of a vehicle.
Yes. And you did that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's go through that. Let's start with the analysis you did of the Isuzu Trooper. We'll start with number B. Oh, sorry, I got to open it a different way. Do you recognize this?
Is this all part of Exhibit 1156?
This is 1150, yes, this is item B within that.
Okay.
So I don't remember much about this as a trooper because we kind of abandoned that theory at some point because we understood that it's not the vehicle because of the exhaust pipes or whatever would look like basically some assembly that appears at the end of that sequence, video sequence. Some illumination goes on for whatever reason, maybe brake lights, whatever. And we see some assembly that looks like piping and so on. And then we looked at this Isuzu and it didn't have it. So at that point, so we pointed that out. And we even did stabilization to show it better. So there are several frames in motion and we stabilized it so you can clearly see it. And at that point, we just didn't follow anymore that Isuzu example. So
We'll get to that. You're jumping ahead, like.
So I kind of erased it out of my memory because it wasn't important.
But this was a Faro scan that you worked with on a vehicle in this case, correct?
At some point, yes.
And you assigned points on this vehicle as well, correct? Same 10 points?
I don't remember that because it wasn't important to me anymore.
We'll go to C. Which would be a still. Did you create this item?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
You had points that were matching up to different aspects on the Isuzu, correct?
Yeah.
Now, some colors are green and some colors are red. Do those have any significance?
No,
None whatsoever?
no. It's just what was the last point that I clicked, something like that. Or moved, because points get moved, adjusted, and so on. It's a dynamic process.
So you were able to place, though, the Isuzu in this image to make it match.
Oh, okay, so I mean, it's too brief to say that way, but if you call that method match, it's called reprojection. So we did reproject Isuzu back to this set of points through the, because you're skipping one big step. How do we go from model to this thing? And so,
I'm sorry, I skipped a step. I didn't have to report saying the steps. So,
okay. So, okay. So, all right, fair. So the process consists of first taking the model, okay, and I don't know if the jury knows what model means, but it's a digital object that is derived by scanning, use a laser scanner, a vehicle. And so you take that model.
and by the model, you're referring to like the Faro scan 3D image of an object.
But it's actually a model because you build kind of model out of it. You take points, you connect them by triangles, and it actually becomes like a real toy, except it's virtual toy inside your computer.
Yes. The jury has seen how the Faro scan makes that 3D model. That's been demonstrated to them. So I'm just trying to use terms that they're familiar with.
Excellent. Okay, so there's a Faro scan model.
A model.
And then then what you do, you match characteristic points that you think correspond to what you see in the image. So think of an image as being just before you put this vehicle there, an image is just a pattern of lights, because that's all you see in this particular. It's like a Christmas tree, and you just see the lights of the tree. Okay, except we're assuming it's not a Christmas tree. We're not matching it to a Christmas tree. So, and then, so you have a configuration then. Configuration consists of two parts. The points that you click on the image and the points that you click on the model. Okay, that part was not shown here. So there are two parts. And then once you have that, you compute something called projection mapping, which is a correspondence between, and I explained this during 402 in great detail. You find a correspondence, if it's possible to find such correspondence, between those lights and that model. And I remember I was explaining it. Somebody gave me a toy car, and I was saying, okay, here are those lights, and here's this image, and here's this toy. And I will be, and the image is kind of like a transparency. And I'm looking through, and I'm moving my toy until I can align all the corresponding parts. And once I did it, that means I found the position of the vehicle and the angle of that vehicle with respect to this image. And that is called projective mapping, okay? And at that point I say, okay, so let's map it back into the image and see where it goes. And this is what you see over here, okay? So then that means I can, there's more involved. There's something called XYZ. I mean, yeah. The vehicle has XYZ coordinates. Each part has an X, Y, and Z, okay? And so the formula, we actually derived a physical formula that takes for each X, Y, Z on the vehicle where it's going to be in the image. We call it X, Y, Z to Y, U, V, okay? Oh, I'm sorry, X, Y, Z to U, V, okay? Because image is only two coordinates, horizontal and vertical, and the real three-dimensional world is three-dimensional, and images, and people don't think this way, but images are kind of a compression of three-dimensional world into a two-dimensional world, which is an image. And so that's a formula, and we use that precise formula that we derived from using those points. And I'm sure I confused everybody at this point. And then, after you do that, with that formula, I position the vehicle back into the image, how it would appear in that image, if it was in that image.
And that's what's here, kind of a fusion, a joining of the model with the video image. Is that be fair?
Right, at the best possible angle and position that the algorithm can find.
And so it's just kind of, okay, how do we have to position it to make it fit? Hey, look, there it is, it fits, right?
Yeah, it's a science actually. We don't we don't play games with animation. We actually derive exact formula, and mathematics is powerful enough to find the best position. So whatever that position is, there's nobody in the world that can find a better position. It's the unique position with the best minimal, what we call minimal square error.
Minimal square error?
Yeah, mean square error, yes.
Okay. Now this image we're looking at here, you actually made a video showing those match up, correct? And I'll show of the evidence video driving into that, correct?
Yeah, it's just a demonstration.
Shows that based on putting measurement points on the trooper, it matches up with the evidence video.
Yes, and the error was fairly small.
Now going back to the image in Exhibit C, that earlier the video was D, going back to C, one of the points you marked was at the rear end of the vehicle on the passenger side, correct?
Yes.
What did you mark there?
Oh, whatever I thought could possibly produce that highlight, which was rear light. I think it's called running light. I'm not sure. I think
A light in the rear, correct?
Well, but there are sections, and up until this case, I didn't realize how complicated this is. And I think people don't look at this, but if you look at the real lights, they are like sections. Some have 3 sections, some have 4 sections. And the question is which section is on at all times. And so I was told that was the section that was on at all times.
That's a different picture. We'll get to that.
No, it is. It's that. That's where it came from. That point on the model corresponded to, I think, second or third, I'm not sure which one,
Okay.
section.
And again, Exhibit D within 1150 is the video of C, correct? Where the fusion between the placement of the model onto the video or evidence video showing that they match up. Correct?
By match up, meaning that the points ended up in the right place.
I gotta stop saying match up. They correspond.
Correspond, yeah. Match is okay.
Now, you did this again with a different positioning. I'll show you E. Can you describe what happened here?
I might have relaxed something. I might have dropped one point, like a back point, and then it kind of shrunk itself to this other position.
So if you remove the assignment of the back point, the model to find the best corresponding shape readjusted itself.
Right, because now it's not constrained by what's happening on the back. So it says, I don't care about what happens on the back. I'm going to do the best I can do in the front. And that best was this.
And so this program will just place it wherever it best fits. It doesn't necessarily make sense if that's truly how a vehicle would drive, right?
There's a physics to it. This is what it does. As I said, there are 2 parts. It's a configuration. There are points that you click in the image, and the points you click on the model. And according to that, it will physically position a vehicle in such a way that as the camera looks at it, the points that you click that should correspond will then try to match it in the best possible way if it's possible. But if it's not possible, then it will actually produce some error when you will see that the point, for example, instead of being in the corner of the light, it will shift somewhere else. And then you know you reject at that point. At that point you reject with this method.
So when it's fusing the corresponding points between the model and the video, looks like the model's angle is turned and its aspect is kind of shrunk down the back so the front looks bigger.
There's no shrunk because there's no shrinking or expanding model. It preserves its original everything. It just looks to your eye. It just found such a position which by the way could be actually something up in the air. It can push it in the ground, it can flip it, it can do whatever it needs to do to find the best match.
And you made a video of this as well, correct? We'll go to exhibit F.
I don't remember.
Does that look familiar?
Yeah, I mean, there aren't many people that could do this, yes. It must be something that I did.
I purposely left the file name on the top that you created, the CSLR-Trooper-Cognitech-3DV Fusion-Front-9P-point.MPEG. Does that sound like a file name you create?
That's my attempt to document the process and the result.
Now, you also did a fusion with the daytime video as well?
That's very easy because the camera did not move between day and night, so you simply threw back the day image on top of it.
And this is image G within that exhibit? And so, could you describe for the jury what you did?
Well, you just took the prior image and you overlaid it with the day image because the day image and the night image camera has not moved. So that, why did we do this? Because we wanted to see where that vehicle is with respect to the curb. And whether its position is physical, because that, without going into many details, I'm sure we're going to go into that, because without using 3D laser scan, with this method, the only thing you can do is something like this, and you look at this, and you try to determine, okay, so the points matched, but what if the vehicle was upside down at that point, or like this? You know it's not physical because 4 wheels have to be on the ground, okay? So that's the reason we overlay with the day to see if that's physical or not. And sometimes it's possible to say, and sometimes it's not possible to say.
And just on the side, Dr. Gruden, I know you expressed something you'd like to take breaks. If you ever need one, or if you just want to stand up and stretch, I think
We can go for now. I have another hour.
Okay. And so, based on this daytime fusion and this positioning, it's a very, very small error for this placement with the Isuzu. Is that accurate?
It was fairly small area, yes.
And do we know what that error was?
Typically, less than 2 pixels disparity. I would have to explain what that means. Each point mapped back with less than 2 pixels, and I think actually it was less than that. Usually I like pixel or less.
And so this one was pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty good, yes. But it was the wrong vehicle.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Then you did measurements of the vehicle as well, based on the model, correct? I'll show you image I. Does this look familiar?
You know, I don't remember doing measurements, but I suppose I did, because again, I didn't care about this car at some point, so. Well, there are measurements on the, can you zoom it up?
Where do you want to do? What do you want me
There's
to
a
measure?
measurement on the model, which shows, okay, so what is this 2.7? Is that meters? It must be meters.
Got to be meters.
Must be meters, okay.
Objection, lax foundation, leading.
Stainless to reading.
Move to strike both witness and counsel comments.
The last answer was stricken.
What is being measured on the
Yeah, it must be meters, because we only have meters and feet for this software program, so we have inches as well, okay. Feet,
On
inches.
image I, on the left side of it, there's a red line between the two tires. What are you measuring there?
It's a wheelbase.
And then you can also see the points that were marked on the 3D model, correct?
Yes, I think so. I didn't see it.
And number 8, here, what's that marking?
That's where we place the hypothesis that that's that right thing on the running, what we call running right point in the video, that's what it corresponds to. Based on explanation I had that that would be the light that is visible throughout.
And going to the right side of image I, what is happening over on this image?
So we just projected back that wheelbase on the ground. Could you go back for a second? Let me try to understand this. Yeah, it's just, at that point, it's not the measurement on the ground. This is actual, it's just a visualization. Can you swipe it back? It's just a visualization projecting back where that line fell. Because it went back in you can see it, right? If you go back in prior, where you showed the vehicle,
Right.
there were also 2 points, right?
Right.
So we're saying, okay, those 2 points are these 2 points.
We'll talk about, go back to G.
Yeah. So in G, basically, if you were to connect a line between this, it's kind of approximate. You can see the scan is so bad that, I mean, where is the actual point of contact? I mean, here, you don't know. That scan was not very good. And I understand the data scans now. So that was like 4 or 5 years ago. And that would be a point this to this, and we simply said that's that thing is, which is 2.7 something meter.
Okay. And then you took another measurement, I'll show you exhibit J, or image J within that exhibit 1150. We'll kind of zoom into the left side. What kind of measurements or markings do you see here? On the left side of the image I.
Yeah, I don't remember this measurement too well, but I am assuming we're measuring the front from the model. We're
Projection
measuring.
lacks foundation based on an assumption,
Overruled.
lack of recall.
Overruled. But
Well, it's kind of obvious what we're measuring here. The beauty of this thing. So you have a vehicle and you have the front of the vehicle and you measure the span, basically the size of the bumper from left to right. That's what we're measuring.
And then again, that was just kind of reprojected onto the still with the same points of measurement from the still from the daytime video.
So, yeah, and again, if you go back to image,
G.
yeah, the actual fusion, what we call fusion, it's reprojected back from here to here.
And here to here, you're going across the front bumper of the model of the Isuzu Trooper.
Yeah, except of course it's kind of sticking out, so there's some.
Then we'll go to K, image K within this exhibit. What do we see happening here?
Okay, so this is very different. Actually, this is already in feet. Okay, that's in feet. And
And you're saying this, you're referring to the image on the right side of image
this
K.
product, it's a always a product, right? So it's a product of what we do. So at this point, and we realized, I think I sent an email to Times or to one of kind of a light bulb went up in my head. And I realized that if I have two wheels on the ground, and I were able to combine this with a laser scan, then I would be able to confirm what that thing is, what that length is. Because the method we used before, does not really measure the vehicle, right? Because it has no information to measure the vehicle. The only information it has is something you're imposing on it, which is the model correspondence, but it's something that a human does. So there's no really confirmation of measurement other than your error. It says, yeah, I mean, that thing is possible, you can put your vehicle in such and such position, but it doesn't actually give you the dimension. So to get the dimension, you look back at this fusion, and then you have to make an assumption, which turns out to be a very important assumption that didn't pan out in one way, that what you're looking at is the vehicle sitting on the ground. You don't actually know that it's sitting on the ground. And for human eye, it's very hard to determine that it's sitting on the ground. Okay? It's sort of kind of like an X-ray, because it's like you see everything through. So you see the day image and the fusion image, and you see them through, and you don't know which one is on top of what, or which, right? So it's kind of like looking on the X-ray, and there are things in the front, things behind, and things behind, and you don't know which one is which. So you can make an assumption that, okay, it looks like it is on the ground. Well, if it is on the ground, then we can actually have a way to draw a line on the ground using laser scan image, and it will give you a distance between 2 points. And this is what we did over here.
And that's kind of what you did on the other side here?
Yeah. And
On
then
the left side of image K?
Yeah, it also shows you position, relative angle position with respect to the laser scan.
Okay.
So it gives you an angle.
And this you labeled Trooper Street Measure. The next one you made, go to image L, Trooper Street Scale Measure. What does this one show? You want me to go in on the left or right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, there's some measurements here, and we were basically confirming those measurements were given by. We were trying to confirm measurements given by this PowerPoint. PDF. So we wanted to see that, in fact, the measurements listed in a hand-measured table would correspond to what we measure over here. And we confirm all of them except for one, and we, somewhere here, there was some measurement that did match, which then we discussed that, and basically we were told that there was an error in measurement, manual measurement. So it wasn't our error, it was a manual measurement, so we didn't worry about it. And the reason you do it is because we skipped this whole part of the process, but you have a day image, and then you have a laser image, and then you have a laser measurement. I'm sure somebody explained those things, okay? Now the day image and laser image that has measurements kind of attached to it are not the same images. So you have to connect them somehow so you can measure from, the day image has no measurements in it. The laser image has measurements and an image. So how do you connect them? So you have to work them on each other by some process, okay? And we had that process, and process turns out to be, you had to find like 6 points in common between two, and then you run a very much similar thing we did with vehicle versus image. It's called projection mapping calculation. When you connect basically something three-dimensional to something two-dimensional. And once you do it, you end up with this, well, in this case actually, this was actual laser image. But you can put a day image there instead and measure, and then you compare measurements from Okay, this is what we're doing. I'm sorry, I didn't look at it. This is what that combination is. And then we want to make sure that whatever measurement we get here is the same that we got from the reference, from the laser image.
And
So
so
if you get the same measurements, that you probably did a right mapping. And it's very important to have a right mapping.
So all the measurements and distances and wheelbase and alignment, all the points all correspond to the right ratio of length, alignment, that based on looking here, so far, it's the trooper.
Objection, misstates his testimony where he said it was excluded.
Stand.
So I said up to this point.
Objection sustained.
Looking at just this information so far, this part of the analysis, does the trooper seem consistent so far?
Okay, so we were talking about other measurements like these things, right? This is to establish the fact that, we found the right correspondence between the laser image and the daytime image, okay? Which is, by the way, equivalent to finding exact position of the camera, where exactly the camera is, and what's the angle of the camera exactly is at the scene. So that's that verification part. Now here's something else. That's an additional thing. Okay, so then once we know that our camera positioning and angle of the camera is correct, then we know we can rely on this image fusion. Okay, and then we can start doing these measurements. So we measure something 9.76, and I don't remember what the right number should be. Maybe you can refresh my memory from the model. What is that measurement on the model? That's what we were looking for.
Sir, you never made a report. I can't refresh your memory.
Oh, it's in the model.
We don't have.
Well,
Yes, you do. You showed it.
why don't we go ahead and take our morning recess? This time about 10-15 minutes. Keep in mind the admonitions, not to form or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case. This hearing will be about 10-15 minutes.